I feel like I want to give like a minute and a half introduction to the idea before I introduce the rabbi. You know, I think we forget. I hope we don't, but some of us may forget the reason why we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, right? It's quite easy to get caught up in some of the particulars of mourning and perhaps not realize, you know, that the word Mishkan means a Mishkan. God gave us a guarantee, so God forbid, if He would take His anger out, it wouldn't be on us. But the truth is, we have tshuva to do. We have some repenting to do and some real changes to make. And when Mashiach does come, and we'll know that He's here when there's a Beit HaMikdash, that means it's a sign that our sins were repaired. So until that's done, we have to realize we have work. And I hate the word. I don't usually use the word hate, but it's called sinat chinam, right? I mean, for whatever that's worth, everyone has to come to their own terms, and hopefully we'll all overcome it and have ahavat chinam. And with that, I mean, just the idea that my wife and I talked about having Rabbi Richman for a long time, and he picked the title, and it was perfect for this time of year. Perfect. Hopefully this is the last time we need to have such a shiur. But we are approaching the 3 weeks, and we're approaching Tisha B'Av. And it came to me, you know, in Gemara Rosh Hashanah, on 18b, there's a whole idea. It was asked, why are we not sending out the agents in certain months? Sometimes we need to, sometimes we don't need to. And the whole idea is that there were two of the rabbinic fast days that weren't as important, perhaps, as Tisha B'Av, for example, and the fast of Tammuz. But nevertheless, the point is that the Gemara brings the famous statement from Zechariah, and that these fasts, the fast of the fourth, that's the 17th of Tammuz, the fast of the 5th, which is Tisha B'Av, the fast of the 7th, which is the fast of Gedalia, and the fast of the 10th, they'll be turned into happiness. So Bezrat Hashem, the truth, you know, just to cut it short, and I want to introduce the rabbi, is that when we see the Beis HaMikdash built, or well, that could be, there's a whole machlokas what that means, a time of joy. Bezrat Hashem, with clarity from the rabbi, we'll know, by the end of tonight, we'll have more clarity of what we need to do to bring that about.
That's putting a lot of pressure on me.
Okay. There you go. That's what we ask you to do. Okay, so Rabbi Chaim Richman, he's a scholar, author, and translator. He's lived in Israel since 1982. Proudly served in the IDF combat unit, as do his children. Rabbi Richman and his wife Rina live in Yerushalayim. Rabbi Richman is an internationally acclaimed authority on the Holy Temple and the prophecies concerning the future of Israel and the world. He's been associated with the Temple Institute of Yerushalayim for nearly 30 years, where he serves as international director. He has authored and translated over 10 books of Torah wisdom. Rabbi Richman lectures extensively to both Jewish and non-Jewish audiences who are seeking a greater understanding of the teachings of Torah and the relationship of the Holy Temple within the nations of the world. His message is universal. Rabbi Richman is the most often quoted English language authority on the subject of the Temple Mount and the Holy Temple, and speaks to audiences throughout the world. I go on and on and on, but we want to hear from the rabbi. So you know what? I'm just going to call him up at this point because this is very extensive. Thank you, Rabbi.
Erev Tov, Chodesh Tov, Shavuot Tov, everyone. You can say Chodesh Tov about Tammuz. It might be a contradiction. Thank you so much for having me. And Yiboneh is my host, right? So that's talking about the Beit HaMikdash, right?
That's it.
A good sign. So I realized, thank you so much for the rousing introduction. I realized I might end up saying some things that might sound a little controversial this evening, or not so mainstream. And I don't really mean to do that. I think what I mean to give over is the simple interpretation of the concept of the time that we're in now. But I think that it's very widely misunderstood. I received instruction that I must not touch the microphone. How is this? Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's better.
Okay. So the fact is, I think the very fact that I'm here tonight also is an interesting kind of thing because I'm a wild-eyed temple fanatic, you know, and it's not easy to get a gig like in Tevet or in the middle of Elul or something. Who wants to hear about the temple then, you know? But now it's more politically correct for us to be talking about the temple because this is a very special time of year. We're exactly 1 week before the postponed 17th of Tammuz, which begins the 3 weeks, which is called Bein HaMitzarim in Hebrew, which is between the straits. And it's a very unique time of year when the whole house of Israel become like mourners for a close family relative in stages, and depending on your edab, depending on your tradition, stages of intensity and increasing mourning. Of course, there's a backstory to the month of Tammuz, which is that these are the days of the traversing of the spies. You know, the spies left the camp of Israel at the end of Sivan, and they returned on the eve of Tisha B'Av, and we know that that giving over of the evil reports against the land of Israel was the first Tisha B'Av, when the people cried over nothing. Hashem said that there's a time that they would have a reason to cry in the future. And because of the fact that Tammuz, and again, they left at the end of Sivan, and they came back on the 8th day of Av, but the whole month of Tammuz was included in the Nechlal, in the walking around of the spies. And that's one of the reasons why Tammuz is considered mystically a worse month than Av. You aware of that? You know, the month of Tammuz is considered to be more of the days of din, of harsh judgment, and the heavy end of the spring than Av. In fact, we have Tu B'Av, just a week after Tisha B'Av, when the whole month there's some sort of a configuration, like a cosmic change, and the dynamic of the month turns into joy. It's the very embodiment of the verse in Psalm 30, where we say, Hashem, you transformed my lament into joy. Into dance, because we get up from Tisha B'Av, we go on to Tu B'Av, and there's that kind of change. But the month of Tammuz is worse, and also there's a concept that our sages have that the beginning of a tragedy is worse. So this is a time of weeping, really. It's a time of very intense introspection, beginning with the 17th of Tammuz, where we start to think about our relationship with the Beit HaMikdash. And as Rabbi Hostin quoted from Zechariah 8:19, thus said Hashem, Master of Legions, the fast of the 4th, which is Shabbat Tammuz, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th will be for the house of Judah, for joy and gladness and for happy festivals. And the end of that verse is love, truth, and peace. And this is the fast of the 4th, and of course the Mishnah in Tractate Ta'anit tells us about 5 specific things that happened on the 17th day of Tammuz. It was the day of the golden calf. It's the day that Moshe descended and saw what was going on and broke the Luchot. It was the day that the city of Jerusalem, the walls were breached. And later in history, there's a question about exactly when it happened. The daily offering in the Holy Temple was discontinued. There's someone, also not clear exactly who he was, named Aposthumus, who burned a Sefer Torah on that day, and a idolatrous statue was placed in the sanctuary. So anyway, during this time that's coming up now, we're all focused. It's very unusual what happens to the Jewish people during this time. We all become focused on the loss of the Holy Temple, and it's a tremendous depth of mourning which increases in stages. So, this is something that goes on every year, every single year. We don't seem to get sick of it. Every single year we confront this cycle and ask ourselves what the loss really means to us, what shirk means to us, and we always find ourselves in the same situation. So one of the real questions that I want to pose is, what does the mourning really do for us? What is it all about? And even halachically, what is its goal? And what is our relationship with this mysterious thing, the Holy Temple, which is missing, that we all become obsessed with now, like a close relative? And clearly, we're not obsessed with a building, right? We're not Masons. It's not a fixation with a building. There's something else that's going on here altogether. True, there are 613 commandments, and that we have a covenantal relationship with Hashem to fulfill, and 202 of them are completely contingent in some way, dependent on the Holy Temple for their fulfillment, and that tells us something about the nature of Judaism without the Holy Temple. It's a strange thing, because we're like fish without water. And so, on the one hand, it is the Ratzon Hashem, and just to digress, I have to say this point because I have to keep up my reputation for being a radical. I just have to say, there is a question about if Mashiach is supposed to build the Holy Temple or the Jewish people are supposed to build it. I'm of the opinion, and the school of thought that I represent of rabbinical tradition, which actually I can prove that this is in a whole other class. I don't want to overstep my mandate. But I believe that the Rambam makes it very, very clear that the Jewish people are obligated to build the Holy Temple. But if it's not built, by the time Mashiach comes and he sees that it's not built, one of the ways that you can tell for sure that he's the real thing and not a questionable Mashiach, because there were in history various questionable Mashiach, so he has an acid test, is if he sees to it that it's built. But it's not his responsibility, because it says in Exodus 25 and verse 8, Va'asu li-mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. They shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. And all the codifiers of Jewish law tell us that this is talking about in every generation. It doesn't say he should build it. It says you should build it, they should build it. So it is a positive commandment. Of course, there's another school of thought, and each thing that I'm touching upon here, this is not my main topic, is something that we need to talk about for 1,000 or 2,000 years, because these concepts are so misunderstood. There's a whole other school of thought that the temple, which is a building of millions of tons, will descend from heaven, ready-made. A lot of fine, pious Jews believe that. I believe that that is not a Jewish concept. It cannot possibly be an authentic Jewish concept for a building to come down from heaven. It never did before, not in the time of the first temple, not in the time of the second temple. It's not a halachically valid concept. I'll get to the mystical side in a moment. It is the influence of other streams of thought on the Jewish mindset throughout the generations. Those who opine that Rashi or Tosafot hold that, I can easily prove that Rashi says otherwise in many other places, that the temple must be physically built by all of us. And why wouldn't it? What other commandment is there in the Torah that we're waiting for God to fulfill? The whole definition of a mitzvah is God commands and we fulfill. He doesn't work for us. There's no such thing as him fulfilling one of his commandments, especially, ironically again, and that when it comes to the Holy Temple, there is almost 100 action-oriented expressions throughout the book of Exodus, the Torah portions that refer to the temple. Va'asu va'asita ta'aseh ta'asu. All of a sudden, this thing about which it can't be more clear that everything has to be made is the thing that we decided that he's going to make it for us. So it's a little bit strange if it is a positive commandment to build it. But again, the fixation that I'm sharing with you, that we're all sharing together during this time of year at least, if not the whole year. I think I could do this in the middle of February too. Prove it to you. Because any time is a good time to talk about the Holy Temple, because all roads lead to the Holy Temple. But the point is, it's not about a building. It's about what the building represents, which is the Shekhinah, which is the source of eternal life, the divine presence. It's about a different level of reality. It's about a different relationship that we could be having with him all the time. And everything that goes on there is leading to that. You know, the famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, where it talks about the 10 miracles, chapter 5 of Pirkei Avot. That in the temple there were 10 miracles going on all the time, and they're listed there, the smoke rising straight from the altar, and all the things that were the phenomena of Jerusalem and the temple. The idea that's being stressed there is that every single person, no matter if you were a spiritual giant, was able to come to this place, this portal, unlike any other place in the world, and engage in this direct, unfolding, dramatic, intimate relationship with God, and get a feeling that there's really a God in the world, and walk away with it revitalized. That's the whole idea, that there is something about this place that's unlike any other place in the world. So that's just one example of the whole concept of the 10 miracles, the place of the Shekhinah. You know, we've been reading about the Paraduma now, and the concept of Tumat Met, and how the Kohanim, any Kohanim here? Who are the conduits for bringing divine blessing into the world, they are exhorted never to have anything to do with what we call the debilitating illusion of death. Because we have this mentality that death is the end, and it's very, very debilitating, and it's very, very morbid, and of course the Torah teaches the very opposite. Death is a birth. Death is the beginning of a new stage of life for the soul outside the body. But because we get very caught up in this, any person that is, for all of Israel to go there, to be in the tomb, it would be a contradiction. But for a Kohen ever to be in that state is a direct contradiction to the fact that this is the place of the Shekhinah, where eternal life is flowing. So the message of that is that if you want to be in the place of eternal life, you have to distance yourself from death. And again, everything that's going on in the Beit HaMikdash is existing on so many different levels of elevating the human experience into something much different than what it is now. Just the topic of the korbanot, which is not our topic tonight, but which we would need so much time to appreciate and discuss, because we are so far from understanding what the korbanot are all about, and unfortunately we're so twisted and influenced by the Gentile, especially the Christian mindset, and anyone else's comprehension of what the offerings in the I won't even use the word sacrifice. The word sacrifice is a horrible word. It's a horrible mistranslation of a Hebrew concept, because the word sacrifice means deprivation. It means loss, giving something up. And that has nothing to do whatsoever with the Hebrew concept of korban, which means what? To become close, to become involved in a relationship. So there's something about bringing the korban to the Mizbeach that involves a person more with Hashem. Now, why that's so is a different question, because I don't raise animals today. A lot of you probably don't, and it's a different kind of society. So you might think that if it comes time to expressing myself, wanting a little bit of extra closeness, or saying I'm sorry, or making a pledge or something, I have to bring something that I really can't live without to the altar. I mean, fun's fun. I mean, I'm not about to do that. I can't live without it. But I'm saying, if it's just about giving something up and a gift, that's not it. But that's not what it is at all. That's not what it is at all. It has to do with so many beautiful secrets of the Torah. It has to do with the secret of the fact that, for example, the book of Leviticus, right, Vayikra, from cover to cover, what is the one word that does not appear? In the whole Sefer Vayikra, from cover to cover, the name Elohim is never mentioned. Every single reference to the service in the temple, from the beginning of Vayikra to the end, and the manual of how to relate to the divine presence is Hashem, which is the name of mercy and flowing love. So something about bringing an offering in the Holy Temple, that's Hashem's giving us a message of love. And it's never, if it was about this vengeful, wrathful Old Testament deity who says, slaughter me up an animal, I want to see his blood in your place, then I would think it would be Elohim. But that's not it at all. There's something else going on there. And of course, it's the greatest mystery of all. This is not our topic. Of the book of, the book of Vayikra. What is the expression, Reach Nichoach? That is such a hard one, right? That it's a sweet savor unto the Lord. What, God is like a carnivore? He doesn't like a good lasagna, eggplant parmesan? What is this? Burning meat is a sweet savor to the Lord? There's a very beautiful understanding here. It's most beautifully expressed by Rav Hirsch, where he explains it that, the problem that we have is that we have a lot in common with the animals. We have a nefesh habahamit, we have a base animal nature, but then what we have that they don't have is we have the godly soul, the Tzalma Elokim. But sometimes they get mixed up. They get all mixed up and the godly soul gets tarnished. And so there's a process that's referred to as birur, it's a type of sifting, whereby a person has to confront his own demons, his own gross physicality that pulls him down, and he has to try and realign, with the godly soul. And when he does, when he comes to the altar, which is the place from where Adam HaRishon was created, and he goes through this tremendous traumatizing experience. I call the service of the Korbanot a psychodrama. It's not an easy thing what we go through every day in the Beit HaMikdash. It's a psychodrama, and we go through this. Something happens internally inside a person. Another mistake that we make because of the Gentile mindset is in thinking that everything that we're doing is for Hashem. First of all, nothing that we're doing is for Him. It's all for us. He doesn't need it. He doesn't need the offerings. He doesn't need us to do Him a favor and do the mitzvot. It's all for Him, for us to become better people. So the idea is that when we bring a korban also, we're not doing it for Him. We're doing it so that we can gain from the experience. And so Rav Hirsch says, when a person goes through all this and realizes that maybe I acted like an animal, and if Hashem were to mityaches, to relate to me according to the name of Elokim, that would really be me. But instead He waits because the highest thing is teshuvah, the greatest gift. That's the reach nicholach. Hashem says, oh, he's becoming a person again. Because the Tzelem Elokim rises up, and the Nefesh HaBahamid takes its proper place. Anyway, again, this is just one very brief insight into what the whole idea of the different level of reality that the Beit HaMikdash brings to the world. Now I'm ready to start. I want everyone to close their eyes for a minute. I just like to do this exercise. I apologize. Close your eyes, don't open them, I'm watching. And picture for yourself, your eyes are open, a piece of chocolate cake. Duncan Hines, rich creamy frosting. Why don't you close your eyes? You don't trust me? You have this piece of cake. It's such a luscious me moment. If it doesn't work for you, try potato burekas, but I need something with a bracha mizonot. Eating is the hardest time to remember God. That's why in Chassidut, it's an avoda, right? It's an avoda because it's not it's a me moment, right? You can open your eyes now. So you had this piece of chocolate cake. It's so wonderful. What's the first thing you do when you finish? Make the after bracha. The after bracha, which is a brief grace after meals for something that's baked, right? We say that to Hashem, have mercy on Jerusalem, your city, and on your altar, and on your sanctuary. And I say to you, Ribono Shel Olam, all I did was have a piece of chocolate cake. It's a piece of chocolate cake because it's so deep. Why do I have to ask God to have mercy on His altar and on His sanctuary for one piece of chocolate cake? And the answer, of course, is, again, because everything is totally muted and lost. The meaning of it is all totally muted without the Holy Temple, and all roads lead there. Everything becomes elevated to its proper standing, and the piece of chocolate cake that we think that we enjoyed, this isn't it. Pinch me. This isn't it at all. It's like the Matrix. We're not even here without the Beit HaMikdash because there is no real relationship with Hashem without it. Anyway, so here we are, and we're going through this cycle now of mourning, and the analogy that comes to mind is very much like, God forbid, the mourning for a close relative. And Chazal, our sages of blessed memory, were very, very wise in the institution of the whole concept of mourning, because the fact is, until such time as the prophet Ezekiel tells us that God will wipe the tears from all the faces and there'll be no more death, until that time, this is the Hanhaga right now, you're not going to see this person again. You're not going to see the person again. And you need closure. You need closure. And so we have this brilliant institution of the practice of sitting Shiva and all the details of the externalization process psychologically for a person to be able to deal with this terrible, terrible shock. The thing is, the analogy doesn't really work when we talk about becoming mourners for the Beit HaMikdash, because, as at least according to my position that I'm trying to present, we're supposed to be rebuilding it, or thinking about rebuilding it. So what is it that we expect to happen? It's not, in other words, the mourning of a relative is in order to be able to deal with that situation, in order to give us the proper toolkit and the proper procedure to be able to go on. But what is the goal of the mourning for the Beit HaMikdash? Is it just to be unhappy? Is it just not to go swimming, not to get married, and to be dirty and not to listen to music during the 9 days? Is that what it is? Is it to be miserable? Or is it something else altogether? And how is it going to happen? Because it's not the mindset of resolve so much. So, how will the cycle change? The verse that we quoted from Zechariah about how these days will become days of joy and days of festival, and this is the question I want to ask: is how we transform it into joy. So I believe that there's a tremendous secret that our sages of blessed memory are at this very moment broadcasting to us, because the depth of the wisdom of the Torah is so limitless, and we're always discovering amazing things. Everybody knows that the names of the months are of Babylonian origin, right? It's a famous Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, and nomenclature is of Babylonian origin. And so is the month of Tammuz. But there's something very, very unusual about the name of the month of Tammuz. What is it? What is the unusual thing? What does the word Tammuz mean? Of all the names of the months, which I understand there's this tradition that the Babylonian exiles came back and brought these names with them, and they were approved by the rabbinical establishment and they were used. But the name of Tammuz is a god. It is a major Mesopotamian deity, Sumerian and later Mesopotamian, which ultimately was transposed in the Greek pantheon as Adonis. So I have a very serious question here. How can it be that our sages of blessed memory allowed the name of a Hebrew month to be the name of a pagan deity? It's really, really strange to me. And the position that I want to share with you, the idea, the approach that I want to share with you, is that there's a secret here, which is beckoning to us to unlock, which is the secret of the abode, of what we really need to be thinking about now during this time. And the strangest thing of all is that the month of Tammuz is the only one of the Babylonian names of the months that are actually mentioned in the Torah, in the Tanakh. There's a verse that mentions Tammuz. Does anyone know the verse? Anyone know the verse? It is so strange. It's just, I don't even know what to say. There's an amazing, mysterious verse in the book of Ezekiel, which is a section where the prophet is telling us about various idolatrous rites and practices that were infecting the people of Israel, time of the first temple. So, open up your heart in the deepest way. This is crazy. This requires an explanation. There's a verse, it's chapter 8 and verse 14. And it says, the prophet is speaking about an experience that he had, a prophetic experience that he had. He says, he, meaning Hashem, he then brought me to the entrance of the gate of the temple of Hashem, that is to the north, and behold, there were women sitting, causing the Tammuz to cry. Moshe Shamatem. That's what it says. Mevakot et Tammuz. These women were causing the Tammuz to cry. And there it is. So what is this talking about? So there's a controversy between Rashi and the Rambam. and all of the commentators are like-minded that this is referring to some idolatrous practice that was actually taking place right at the entrance to the temple. So what was it? So according to Rashi, the Tammuz was an idol made of iron. And the eye sockets in the idol were empty. And they placed into, this was the way it was served. The idol was served in the following manner. Into these empty eye sockets was placed lead. The lead was ignited and it melted, creating an optical illusion of tears. Creating the optical illusion of the shedding of tears. And that there was a cult of Tammuz, which is about fabricated tears. That's what was going on here. Rambam, on the other hand, a great philosopher, in his famed Guide to the Perplexed, he explains it in much more detail. And he tells us that there was an immensely popular cult of performance arts, which is actually the precursor of the modern genre of Greek tragedy, or in our time, the soap opera. I'm not kidding. That celebrated, this particular genre, this cult, celebrated the death of a god named Tammuz. It's a very long story, and this is not Idolatry 101, so I'm not going to fill you in on all the details, but his death was portrayed in a play. Later, it became, and at that time it was Tammuz and Ishtar. Later it became Adonis and other figures in different religions. But it was so popular, this cult, it became so much a part of popular culture that it was actually shown right at the gates of the temple. They were like matinees, pagan matinees. How odd, how bizarre, were performed at the gates of the Holy Temple, and women were so taken by the tragic story of this character that he had to go down into the netherworld, and she wanted him back. And in the pagan mindset, this became the explanation for the cycle of winter to spring and all sorts of things like this. It's very, very ancient, and it was very, very tragic. And women would cry and sit and weep over it because it was very pitiful and very painful. So the Abarbanel, he comments on the Rambam, and he says, and I quote, "And the great rabbi had access to ancient books." He says that about the Rambam. The great rabbi had access to ancient books. So apparently he's referring to the fact that the Rambam was a tremendous scholar of world culture and read up on this whole topic. So I wanted to do that too, developing this idea. So I found that there's for example, a layman's guide to world mythology. The classic Larousse Encyclopedia of Mythology explains the origin of this whole ancient story. Tammuz, the lover of Ishtar, was forced to die and to descend to the underworld, and Ishtar bewailed her sorrow and bitter lamentations in the midst of a choir of weeping women. So this was immensely popular in the ancient world, and it actually was repeated and perpetuated year after year, and it was bewailed in funeral chants. And the god was believed to die every year. And then the famous Scottish anthropologist, Sir James Fraser, who was considered to be, his book, The Golden Bough, is considered to be one of the most influential books of the 20th century. His anthropology, he writes that laments for the departed Tammuz are even extant today in Babylonian hymns. And he describes it as, I quote, "Lament of the flutes of Tammuz, to shrill mourning of women with flutes, melancholy rites." And again, the story reflects a certain cycle of the year, onset of winter and spring, and it's a story of great pathos. But again, so this is what it is. And this is what the verse in Ezekiel chapter 8 is referring to, that somehow this whole act became so popular in Jewish popular culture that there were actually matinees performed at the gates of the temple. So obviously this is very, very strange, because the whole idea of Tammuz, as that we know, certainly is a time for crying But we're crying for the Holy Temple. But yet it turns out, according to these verses, that in the time when the temple was still standing, this idolatrous cult of Tammuz somehow crept into the Jewish mindset, and that's what the tears were for. So the main idea that I want to develop and share with you is that this whole idea of the crying associated with Tammuz is the key to understanding the real tragedy of Tammuz. And as I say, maybe it's a bit much for some people, but what it is that the people of Israel are stuck in a certain cycle. And we go through this cycle year after year. And the mourning for many of us becomes not a means to an end, but the end. And this is what we're used to doing. How many people on their way to shul on Erev Tisha B'Av with their chair say to each other, as they're walking into shul, Mitzvah Hashem, we're not going to be fasting this year. That just burns me up. And I feel like saying, what exactly do you think is going to happen? That you're not going to be fasting this year or next year? You know, there was an ad that I saw in a Jewish magazine one time for a new chair that's developed for Tisha B'Av. It's called the Avail seat. It comes from the two words availability and avail, like mourning, you know. And it's called the Avail seat, and somebody, I guess, is making a lot of money, and it's very convenient, and you can take it with you and set it up and sit down, and it's the halakhic height and everything like that. But the way that it was advertised is what really disturbed me. It said in the ad, it will forever change the way we mourn on Tisha B'Av. So it's a little bit strange, this whole idea again, because what I really believe is that there's a message that is being broadcast here, because the purpose of the Jewish people in this world is to uproot idolatry. This is the whole secret of the Korban Pesach, that it was in the faces of the Egypt, of why they took it into the house 4 days early and tied it to the bedpost, because there is no escape from our destiny, and our destiny is to confront idolatry and uproot it. So why did the sages actually go to the extent of having the name of this month, in which is hidden the secret of our redemption, of calling it Tammuz? Because the whole secret of what we are to do in the world is to confront these forces, not only the external forces, and what I say external, a lot of people are waiting for something to happen. Something's going to happen, something extraordinary is going to change, some external factor, and then the temple is going to be rebuilt. But that isn't really the way it works in Jewish law. So the sages are confronting us with the name of the month is Tammuz, because it's not only about that cult, it's also about what we have to deal with within us. Remember Carly Simon, I haven't got time for the pain, or am I dating myself? Okay? So the idea is, there's this certain comfort zone in the devil you know, in the pain that we know, in nostalgia, in going through these things again and again and again. A few years ago, you know, I'm associated with Mechon Mikdash for 30 years. A few years ago, the administration, the rabbis of Mechon Mikdash, the Temple Institute, were invited to the president's house the week of Tisha B'Av. I won't mention which president, he didn't end up so well. But he was a very religious man, so he had a Chug Tanakh in his residence, a Tanakh class in his residence. And the week of Tisha B'Av, they were going to do a special session on the mourning for the Holy Temple. So we were invited and sat in the audience. And on the platform, there were many great and leading rabbis of the generation. And I sat in the audience, and the president got up, and he said, yes, the president of the state of Israel, and even when we have total peace with our neighbors, and in secure borders, and we have no problems whatsoever, we'll still remember to mourn for a holy temple, because it's our right, it's our God-given right, it's our legacy. We'll always be mourning for the holy temple. And other rabbis sat there and nodded, and I couldn't understand that exactly, because the whole concept of what this cycle of mourning is supposed to bring us to is a feeling that we don't want it anymore. We can't stand it anymore. And again, I'm not that radical. I'm not advocating you all to go out right now with pickaxes and start building the whole temple. That's another issue altogether, how it's going to happen. But if you're waiting for it to come down from heaven, like turkey lurkey or henny penny, that's not really an authentic Jewish concept. It just isn't. And if we're pinning it on some person to do it like Mashiach, we have to delve deeply in ourselves and start to analyze, according to the sources of Jewish understanding, what we think Mashiach is. Because he's not superhuman, and he's not supernatural, at least not according to Maimonides. He's a regular person who dies, his children die, his grandchildren die. The world is going to be the same world when he comes. In fact, according to the Rambam, the more and more that we understand what he's writing, he's basically a political emancipator. He's basically a great political figure. But he's certainly not supernatural. That's not our religion. So we're all waiting for something to happen, but maybe the key is to understand that nothing is going to happen until we really begin through introspection again, and through understanding, and through teshuvah, and yes, through a lack of sinat chinam, but also through bricks and mortar. Because the fact is, the bottom line is, and again, it's very uncomfortable for people to deal with, and that's why we invented a vast superstructure of excuses that it's going to be Mashiach, that it's going to come down, and all sorts of implausible scenarios, because how could we possibly deal with the geopolitical reality? But the point is, it really is up to us, and if you take the position that it's a mitzvah, like any other mitzvah in the Torah, that's actually, there's so many details, and this is the beautiful approach of the Sefer Chinuch and many other commentaries. The idea is, it says, Va'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocha. They shall make for me a sanctuary and dwell among them. But then, like I said, there's over 90 other expressions of action. Make the menorah, make the tzitz, make the altar, make all these things. And yet, with the exception of the Ramban's explanation of the Ark of the Covenant, which he holds as a separate mitzvah, all the other details of the Mikdash are the same thing. That it's one mikshah, it's one piece. They're not separate mitzvah. Did you know that? All those different things, Taseh, Vasu, make the Choshen, make the menorah, they're not separate mitzvah. There's only one mitzvah, which is building the temple. That's the beauty, if I may say, of the work of the Temple Institute in building the vessels. Because the Rambam tells us in Sefer HaMitzvot, in the category of positive commandments, number 20, he tells us that every single particular detail of the building of the temple is part of the Mikdash. It's the same thing. And therefore, if I have a temporary obstacle, for whatever reason, in the actual building of the temple, I can somehow, albeit in a manner that might look odd or piecemeal, I can begin, at least to the best of my ability, the beginning of the construction of the temple by doing that part which we are able to do. And that's really what that is all based on. But what I'm really proposing is an upheaval of thought, which I think is so, on the one hand, delicately, on the other hand, furtively couched for us in the tremendous caring hand of the great helmsman of Chazal, who gave us this flashing sign of this concept that something's very wrong with the picture by calling this month Tammuz. Imagine this month, which is, by the way, the month of the terrible destruction of the temple beginning, is named after not only a foreign god, but a foreign god whose cult was the cultivation, pardon me, of crocodile tears, of fabricated tears, of melted lead, giving the appearance of crying. Or do we have the appearance of crying, or do we really feel that we want to do something about the building of the temple? Again, I'm just saying, there's something really here to think about, which I can illustrate with a very, very beautiful story. And with this, perhaps I'll conclude this part, and we could maybe take some questions if you like. But, you know, my rabbi, the founder of the Temple Institute, Rabbi Ariel, was a paratrooper in the time of the liberation of the Temple Mount in 1967. It was a tremendous thing to think about what it was like for those young men on the Temple Mount for the first time, you know, in so many years. And he describes the scene that day, June 7, 1967, that the soldiers were approached by a Jordanian in Western dress, who introduced himself as being the representative of the Jordanian parliament, and he wanted to show the soldiers around. So he takes the soldiers, takes the rabbi, and he says to them, this is where the sanctuary stood, This is where the altar stood. In such and such a century, there was a synagogue here in this place, which of course is the opposite of the position of the Palestinians now, and Jordan as well, which is that there never was a temple, and we made up the whole thing. She's telling him all these details about the Holy Temple. So the rabbi said, why are you telling me all this? And what did he say? He said, because we have a tradition from our fathers that one day the Jewish people are going to wage a war and conquer this mountain and rebuild the Holy Temple, and I assume that you're starting tomorrow. Obviously, that's not the issue of hindsight. Eit Ratzon, not Eit Ratzon, whatever it was a very, very special time that began a tremendous spiritual revolution for the Jewish people. And today, there is more being done for the concept of studying about the Holy Temple, preparing the Holy Temple, preparing Kohanim for the service of the Holy Temple, raising red heifers. There is more attention being paid to these mitzvot and to their execution than there ever has been in history. Not to mention the whole concept, which we're certainly not going to get into now, of ascending the Temple Mount. And the importance of that, done properly with reverence for halacha and in purity and mesirat nefesh. The tremendous numbers of Jews, good, pious Jews in purity, that are ascending to the Temple Mount because they realize this is the place that God wants to see us in. This is the key to the redemption of the Jewish people. So, Bezrat Hashem, as we approach this, it's a very, very special period of time when we have the opportunity to invest in this relationship and to think about what this really means to us and how important it is, how central a role it plays in the Holy Torah, and how something really is terribly wrong with the picture of our living like fish out of water without the whole basis of our identity. And, you know, somebody once said, you know, there's an act of piety which is not done by very many people anymore called Tikkun Chatzot. Tikkun Chatzot is a Kabbalistic prayer and learning service of people who get up at night and they lament the destruction of the Holy Temple. Nowadays it's not done by very many people anymore. But you know what? A person who really feels the loss of the Holy Temple doesn't have to set an alarm clock. You can't sleep. You can't sleep through the night. That's what it really means, Tikkun Chatzot. Because Hashem's honor is being totally defiled. With everything that's wrong with the world today, and this is what all the Nevuot and the Psukim, look at the whole book of Haggai, where how Haggai describes economic downfall and and poverty and all of the world's problems are a reflection of the fact that the temple service is not taking place. Again, not because it's voodoo, not because there's some tit for tat, not because there's some sort of cosmic alignment, but because we are not connected at all to the divine potential of what man is, and because we are not taking ethical responsibility for the state of the world without the Holy Temple, which is what it's all about. So, my blessing to you is that we should redouble our efforts in understanding what this period of time really means to us. The next time, before we start fasting, the next time we make an alamichya for the chocolate cake, we really think, wow, this is an amazing thing. Hashem, have mercy on your altar and on your sanctuary and on us, and give us the strength and the wisdom and the fortitude to really do the right thing and show you the proper honor, or at least not excuse our inertia by some false religious excuse. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow.
So if you are invited back, I'll understand that I crossed the line, but I have to be true to myself. Yes, sir.
How do you, when over your years of working and explaining, you must have come across Jewish people, non-Jewish people, who have brought up the subject of animal rights, and how do you placate and how do you get through to these people when they say to you, but that sounds like a horrific idea, animals being led up there and brought up. How do you
What do you say to them? I feel very uniquely qualified to answer that question because I'm a vegetarian. The reason that and then people say, well, that's insane. You're talking about the korbanot, that's your life's work, and you're a vegetarian. That's exactly why I'm a vegetarian, because my vow is that until I can bring the Passover offering, I don't want to eat meat because personally, and I know I'm crazy and I'm an extremist, but I think that it is a selfish, wanton, lustful act to eat meat when the primal forces of life that animal represents are not rectified without the korban and the Beit HaMikdash. So I agree that animals need to be treated properly, and I agree with a lot of that. The problem is that a lot of people who are champions of animal rights are really, really horrible people. I don't know if you ever noticed that. Present company excluded, but I'm saying there are a lot of people who can be champions for all sorts of things, but when it comes to how we treat Ben Adam L'Chavero, they're sadly lacking. And I have a lot to say about this particular topic, but the bottom line is that somebody will say to me, you know, it sounds like a big slaughterhouse to me, and my answer is, well, you know what, the world is a slaughterhouse right now. And you know what the book of Leviticus is? It's the book of Hashem's rights. We're always talking about our rights, we're always talking about animal rights. What about his rights? He says that this is the bottom line of the foundation of the universe, this process. And again, I gave the example of a cell phone. If it was about giving something up, I think that in our time, there's a lot of other things that we might be giving up, but that's not the message. The message is so deep. The message is that this problem that we have of the confusion between the Tzelem Elokim and the Nefesh HaBahamit is so prevalent and so deep. It's been going on since the beginning of time, and it always will. And I can prove it to you. Just look around the world. You know, I mean, from gender misidentification issues to the legalization of brothels for bestiality in 3/4 of the states of the United States of America and Europe. What do you do about that? It's worse than the generation of the flood. And you know what it comes from? It comes from this idea that we are the same. I don't have more rights than that animal does. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not what the Torah teaches. The Torah teaches that man is the center of the universe. And everything that Hashem created, He created to bring us closer to Him. That doesn't mean that you have to be cruel to animals or that you shouldn't be feeling. But when it becomes a cloak for, or an excuse for not working hard enough on a person's developing his own humanity, that's what I object to.
So I'm not vegetarian, by the way, either. I mean, I'm not vegetarian.
So no, I'm not a preachy vegetarian, I'm just a vegetarian. Very private.
Where are your chickens like? Where are your chickens like?
Well, according to the Orach Chaim HaKadosh in Sefer Breshit, there's a very beautiful mahalach there where he explains about the different, did you really want to do this? About the different life forces. You see, while chicken midioraita is not meat, it's kind of like a bridge, right? But fish, for example, are a higher life force. That's why there's no mitzvah of shechita with fish, just to gather them. How they die is inconsequential, because their souls are much higher, so they don't have to go through the whole tikkun of shechita. Anyway, I like meat, really. I do. I just, don't feel comfortable with it. I'm not that person.
So, for me it's pretty clear that there are different levels of work on the temple, on the building the temple. And the personal level is very clear because we are made in Tzelem Elokim. So we have a mizbeach, we have a curtain, and we have a Kodesh Kodashim in physical form that we have to work to build our temple through mitzvahs, through Torah. And this is a personal work. But when we talk about Am Yisrael is it's a body in itself. It's a cloud. So, and here comes the idea of the physical temple in the Holy Jerusalem that belongs to all the body that is a single body together of Am Israel. So when I speak about my personal work, I know what I'm doing, and actually I'm responsible for what I do, because if I don't keep kosher, no one can come to me and say, listen, you have to do it. It's up to me, chas v'shalom. But when it comes to Am Israel, as a group of people that form a single body, and here is the question: how can we reach that level of purity and work as Am Israel to build the physical temple that is the image of all the cloud, and how this is really connected in our reality, this physicality that we are living here, from now. What is the work to do physically? Because for me it's very clear, even if it bothers me that there's a connection between the physical and the spiritual. But I understand that there's a physical work with the bricks even
Right.
to do. So how Am Israel can really start from now to really build the temple.
An idea developed in Jewish history, later in history, of this anthropomorphic transformation of the temple as, like, for example, the kavanah that you have before you put on tefillin, about the 7 branches of the 7 lights of the menorah, the orifices of a person are like the 7 lights of the menorah, and on a symbolic level. And there's many beautiful parallels that are made to, I think, the first idea that you're talking about, which is the personal temple. However, honestly, that is a much later idea, and there's something a little bit Christian about it. Pardon me, just being truthful. The notion that which I'm confronted with all the time. People say, who are we to build the temple? And I don't think this is what you were saying, but you were saying, how are we going to do it? How are we going to do the national aspect of it, right? One of the things that people say very often is, there were such greater generations than us, and they didn't do it. Who are we at all to do it, and we're not pure enough, and we're not holy enough, and that kind of thing. All that has no basis whatsoever in Jewish law. The people who came back with Ezra to build the Second Temple were destitute street people. 42,360 Jews came back in the first wave. You know how many stayed in Babylon, where they had academies, they had yeshivas, they had money, houses, positions of influence? Millions. Millions of Jews stayed behind, and 42,360 losers came. That's exactly what happened.
Sounds right.
And this whole idea, yes, exactly. And this whole idea, or am I being too direct? And this whole idea of that you have to be on a certain level, that's not written in the Torah. Hashem wants us to build him a house as we are. Yes, sir.
So I learned that when Herod rebuilt the city, with the walls going around, he trained 1,000 Kohanim. They were the only ones allowed to build the actual temple.
By Cheney?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's completely accurate. The Rambam tells us specifically, as a point of law, that, for example, when it comes to the Kodesh Kodashim, right? It's better to have Kohanim. If you don't have Kohanim living, if you don't have Living Israel, if you don't have them, even Goyim, you're allowed to build if you have to. So it's a question of priority of what we're able to do, always looking for the best thing. But the temple doesn't have to be built by Kohanim.
So one of the signs I've understood of the era of Mashiach coming is that truth will become more and more known in the world. And we think or believe, or we also think that there was a temple, there were temples, and Christians also think this, and I don't know what the Islam says about the stage of Jerusalem. I don't think it says anything about all the things that they made up later, what they put the buildings there for. My question is one of your ways to promote the building of the Mikdash to speak about speak about the truth of these things and looking for ideological or historical support. Something that politicians won't do. They won't say that Judaism is the right religion, so this is actually our place. But is it something you do?
Are you asking if I'm trying to raise consciousness of all people?
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is exactly what I'm trying to do.
But also on the historical and archaeological evidence.
I'm not an archaeologist. My son is an archaeologist. He's one of the directors of the Temple Mount sifting program. But from the Torah perspective, I certainly am trying to do as much as I can to bring vast swaths of humanity to the understanding that life is not what it should be for the nations as well. One of the greatest privileges of my life, I think, for many decades now, has been my involvement with the Noahide movement. There are tremendous amounts of people throughout the world. As an American, my constituency is Americans. I deal a lot with American Christians who feel that they want to bring themselves closer to an understanding of the God of Israel and their responsibility with the God of Israel, and they seek to leave paganity and come as close to the experience of living with the Torah as possible. And that has a lot to do with the Beit HaMikdash, because the Holy Temple is the central arena for the direct relationship of all people with God, and it is a key in the equation of all people coming to an understanding of who God is.
My question is related to that. So, to people coming from a Christian background or to Orthodox Jews, there's already an opening. Do you have a strategy for helping liberal Jews in America understand the significance in any way of what we're talking about?
Wow.
You gotta crawl before you do
That's very hard. It's so hard. You found me out. My deep, dark fear. I don't want to say anything bad about Jews. It's a problem because, you know, there's a mindset that's developed, and I don't have good experiences there. Occasionally, I have some refreshing experience, but I don't have the strategy. No. You found me out. To say that. One second. I feel more encouragement and understanding from non-Jews than I do from liberal Jews, which is very, very frustrating.
Yeah.
Sir.
As far as technological advancement, Israel is looking like a light unto the nation. My question is, can we make the same energy with the spiritual upliftment of light unto our nation?
If I understand,
so that we can build
your question is a wonderful question, because I'll repeat it to make sure. You're saying since Israel is accredited with so many technological advancements, can we do that spiritually also? Right?
Yes.
So that's a very beautiful point, because let's say in Zechariah, it says that 10 men will come from among the nations and grab hold of the corner of a Jew and say, can we go with you? Why? Not because of intel or Mobileye or anything, but because we heard that God is with you. So I think that the wonderful advancements that Israel makes for the whole world in medicine and technology are all a byproduct of what Israel has to give to the world. But what Zechariah is telling us is that that's not the mission of the Jewish people. The mission of the Jewish people is to teach the whole world that there's a God in the world. The mission of the Jewish people is for everyone to come to us and say, show us Hashem, and let us go with you. And I think that anyone who understands Jewish history, and this is something that the world is aware of. And it's like the verse in Isaiah says, Hashem says to Israel, "You are my witnesses. You're my witnesses." What does that mean? You are my witnesses that I exist. Because if you look at Jewish history for the past 5,000, 1,500, 150, 10 years, you have to admit something's going on here. It doesn't make any sense. And so the Jewish people, you know, the Jewish people are called the chosen people, right? A lot of Jews, like the ones that Rebbetzin was referring to, they're not happy with that title, right? I didn't get a chance to fill out an application that I recall. I didn't fill out the questionnaire. Do you want to be the chosen people? There it is. What does it mean, though? What does it mean? A lot of people think it means that we're the best film producers and pediatricians and Wall Street brokers, which we happen to be. But that may be a coincidence. What it really means to be the chosen people is that the Jewish people are the agents of God throughout the saga of human history to remind the whole world that God exists. So the real answer to your question is that's exactly what we were really supposed to be doing. That's what the Holy Temple is all about. It's about shining a spiritual light into the whole world. And with all of the grandeur, the tiferet, how I even translate that, of Medinat Israel, and everything that we've accomplished, and the wonder of the state of Israel, the miracle of the state of Israel, it's so embryonic without the Holy Temple, because the vehicle by which we will really be able to shine Hashem's light is, according to His will, is the place of the Shekhinah.
When I used to learn about the instrument that Kohen Gadol wears during the Hindu service, it says something about
holiness to the Lord.
No, but I don't know if in the Nevi'im it also says that in the future the horse will wear something like same what the Kohen Gadol wears. How am I supposed to understand this? Because I thought it's a very thing that Kohen Gadol wears, but when it says also the horse will wear this kind of thing in the future.
I'm not so familiar with the verse. I'm not so familiar with the verse. And we'll look at it afterwards.
There was a period in biblical Judaism that the temple wasn't built, and they had a Mishkan. The Jewish people can serve in a certain capacity without the temple if it has a Mishkan. Would that be an option?
You mean, why don't we rebuild the tabernacle in the meantime?
Perhaps.
That's an excellent question. Because the tabernacle was the holy temple in traveling form, in modest, miniature, collapsible form, suitable to the harsh conditions of the desert, right? And also accompanied the people of Israel within the land while the tribal portions were proportioned. But from the time that David and Samuel established through prophecy, they cemented the tradition that had already been known, that the place that I will choose, the place that I will show you, is indeed referring to Har HaMoriah. So again, in the words of Maimonides, a new halachic reality was created. And the new halachic reality is that the only place in the world that a Jew can build an altar is that place. Interestingly, there is a halacha that Noahides may build an altar anywhere in the world and bring certain type of offerings. There are criteria for how that altar has to be built. Certain dinim apply, but Israel can only build an altar in that one place, the very specific place. In fact, it's again the language of Maimonides, "Mekomo mechuvan biyoter." The place of the altar is exceedingly specific, and the reason that it's exceedingly specific is because that's the very place from where Adam HaRishon was created. So in a practical sense, the tabernacle became a history and wouldn't be repeated. And in fact, according to a number of deot, we know where the pieces are as well. But it's not to be repeated within the land because it's that particular place. quick question.
Thank you. I know at the second temple, there was a movement to, there was a great movement that I see sort of similar to the Temple Institute's movement to build a temple nowadays. But when I look at the history of the second temple, there was a lot of turbulence in the Jewish nation. They had everything they needed. They had the building, they had the growing up, they had everything that Brooke said, but there were a lot of problems. Do you think that in the end, if we do get the third temple, that we can just look and suddenly see a building, we won't see a spiritual elevation, we'll just see it will be very mundane, it will be very, that it will really help. Do you ever doubt that we won't see a salvation so completely for the Jewish people?
You mean, do I think that it's possible that we'll just blow it again? That is absolutely possible. We would leave it to us to rise to the potential, to our greatest potential and fail. I agree with you that in the time of the Second Temple there were there was much turbulence. In fact, honestly, in the words of our sages, there wasn't even a moment in those hundreds of years of real liberty. There was always subterfuge of foreign kings and then the terrible infighting. There was terrible things that were going on. The reason that our sages emphasized the period of the Second Temple is because it became associated as a golden age of Torah study. Torah study was very much lauded as a commodity, and it advanced very much in the time of Rabbi Chaim, but on the level of socio-political, it was terrible. So some people have the impression that we're going to build the third temple and it's going to last forever. That isn't necessarily a promise. We could definitely ruin it again. Hope not. But this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to emphasize the spiritual essence of what it's all about. It's most certainly not about a building. Not at all about a building. And it's most certainly not enough that we're all going to be just totally transfigured by the fact that the building is standing. It's everything that it presents us with in terms of the potential of connecting with who we really are inside, with each other, and most importantly with Hashem, to connect through all things. No two places are alike. You know, that's one of the unbelievable lessons of Torah, with the whole concept of Kadosh. You know, no two places are alike. You know, and this is not Connecticut that we're talking about, and it's not you know, Norway. It's the one place on earth that Hashem chose to rest His presence, whatever that means. But what emanates from that place is a clear knowledge and understanding that this is real. And that's what it's really all about. And that has to be accompanied. It's like the gentleman was asking if we're ready and who could do it, and purity and everything. You know, if you believe in Jewish destiny, if you believe that this is what we are created for, we have this power inside of us. And we seem to touch upon it, and we seem to reference it every year at this period of time, where we grapple over ourselves and we say, wait a minute, we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, I'm going to do this now for the 3 weeks and everything. Why? You know, all I'm saying is why, and I'm saying the same thing as you, because we really have to connect with what this whole thing is all about. You know, it's not a religion. We're a people. We're a people, and a people has a way of life and a covenant, and that's what we're all about representing Hashem in the world. And the key to that whole thing is that one place unlike any other. And we're all kind of like dancing around it in a way, and like, by dancing around I mean figuratively, you know, we're touching upon it, we're a little too afraid to make it more real. But that's really what we're being asked to do during this time of year, is to realize that this is not normal. We're not a normal people. Who does this? Who loves the pain so much, like Carly Simon said, right? Who romanticizes pain as good as the Jewish people? Who romanticizes nostalgia and suffering as much as we do? Like, yalla, let's build it. I made a series of movies. I'm finished. Made a series of movies, very short videos the past few years, to try to inspire people to think a little bit differently during this period. So very short, like 90 seconds to 2.5 minutes. Some of them are called The Children Are Ready. You can find on the Temple Institute YouTube channel. So the goal of these films is to give people a little bit of a wake-up, like that this time doesn't have to always just be about misery. It could be like something hopeful. So there's one of them that we made where these kids come into a shul on Tisha B'Av and they see everybody sitting on the floor, and the kids come in and they pick the adults up off the floor and they walk out. It's based on a true story. You have to see it, it's very beautiful. The true story was that my grandson, who was like 4 years old, the first time he ever saw Tisha B'Av that he remembered, he came into shul and he saw everybody sitting on the floor. He asked his father, what's wrong? So his father said, the Beit HaMikdash is broken. So he goes out and he comes back in with a toolkit, plastic tools. And he says, let's go fix it. Like, that's normal, healthy thinking. Why are you sitting on the floor if it's broken?
Technical. So, okay, in 1967, something happened. Most of us were not in politics. We didn't have any power. The keys were given over. Now it's not in our hands. There's a tremendous amount of multitudes of enemies. Are you suggesting that if we change our attitude, they will just change their attitude and we can go ahead and build it? Or is there something more we need to think about?
The 10th of Nisan, the year that Israel left Egypt, Hashem says, take a set into the house. They take the set into the house. Why? And all the mitzvahs say, what are you going to do with that set? And they all said, we're going to slaughter it. And the Mitzrim, this was their God, they were like, and now you would have thought that there would have been like a riot or like incendiary kites and helium balloons, at least. And they did nothing. They did nothing because there's no power that can stand up to the azut de kedusha of a Jew who wants to fulfill Hashem's mitzvah. That's what Chazal say. This was the whole purpose of it though. Where was the blood that they put on the doorposts? It wasn't outside. The Malach didn't need to know where they lived. And first it was Hashem himself. He knew where, he didn't need the GPS, right? It was for us to strengthen ourselves and remember, right? So I think the idea is, first of all, it's not all that complicated. It is a very perfidious story of the backstory of it is the very bizarre relationship that Medinat Israel has with the Kingdom of Jordan. And the fact that, as the politicians say, from where I sit, I see something else from where I sit, and they're concerned about what's going on the other side of Jordan and keeping Jordan stable. And that's why we pump it up with technology and with water and with all sorts of things, and all we get is scorn in return. The King of Jordan has a personal family tradition that they are the direct descendants of Muhammad, and the Arab world is upset with him for making peace with Israel, and therefore it's very important to him to hold on to what he calls his God-given right of being the custodian of the holy places. According to the 1994, was it, peace accords with Jordan, every one of the three monotheistic religions is supposed to have complete and unfettered access to all the holy places in Jerusalem. Instead, every prime minister in the state of Israel, from Levi Eshkol on, has dealt with the Temple Mount like an albatross, like a liability in the time of Barak and Ben Ami, that they offered it to Arvan and it wasn't good enough. But the idea is, ultimately the person that's responsible for the policy of the Temple Mount is the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister, in my opinion, broadcasts a very unfortunate and incorrect message to the world by saying that the one thing that we're going to mevater on is the holiest thing in the world to us. In other words, this whole idea of the status quo, if you're familiar with the fact that Jews are not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount, that is not a legal standing. It is a paralegal arrangement. Status quo, the word literally means arrangement, I believe, or things as they are. It is completely illegal and completely contravenes every law of the State of Israel, and it's been shot down by the High Court of Justice for decades. And it doesn't exist within the peace accords. We're supposed to be able to pray there. The Christians have no religious rights in many Arab countries, and Israel prides itself as being a beacon of democracy, which is a wonderful thing, and guarantee the religious freedoms of everybody except the Jews. So what are you worried about? In other words, this situation is untenable. And every pogrom or every attack and everything that happens to every Jew in the world through the Tikshoret emanates from the fact that the world sees how Israel treats the Jews. When the world sees Israel destroying a Jewish house, what does that mean? When we destroy a Jewish house in our own land? And what does it mean when a Jew who goes to say Shema Yisrael on the Temple Mount is hauled off? So something is terribly skewed here. But I don't know if I answered your question. And I brought up the example of the sound, Erev Pesach. Again, if we believe that this is what we're supposed to be doing, shouldn't we at least be talking about it? Again, the first thing I said when I came in, I'm not trying to radicalize anyone. So don't go out and build it now. But at least shouldn't we be speaking the truth? Shouldn't we be speaking the fact that it is a mitzvah and not excuse it that with some philosophy? There's no philosophy here. It's a mitzvah to say. We keep kosher, we keep Shabbat, va'asu mikdash. There's no differentiation or haflaya with the mitzvot. There's no discrimination. They're either mitzvot or they're not mitzvot. And this is a sticking point for a lot of people.
One last question? Two?
How, based on what you're saying, there's a lot of sort of, I would say, strength towards feeling positive about these ideas, but I find not Tisha B'Av itself, which is obviously a day of mourning and restriction and abode, I find these arbitrary restrictions that get a bit stronger as you get nearer, I find them difficult to, I just find that a lot of people, and myself, it's sort of a period you just want to get out of the way. It's not, you're not thinking in the direction of the ideas that you're giving, and I don't know how, I suppose, difficult one for you to answer, but how relevant do you think all these restrictions are, these sort of arbitrary concepts of not listening to music that you can go to a film maybe, or you could. I'll
tell you from the bottom of my heart how I deal with it, and then I'll leave and I won't expect to be invited back. Which I don't expect the case to be. Chip on my shoulder. The restrictions are about kavod shamayim. The mourning that I feel is because of the fact that the Jewish people are stuck. I am not going to not mourn together with the Jewish people. I'm not going to not fast. I have every reason in the world to. When I daven the Nachem, which I do in a different version anyway, there are several versions. When I talk, or even Musaf on Yom Tov, it's very hard for me. Musaf on Yom Tov is very hard for me. What is that? It's not relevant at all, because it's our fault. So my kavanah is that we allow that hand to be there. Understand? In other words, it's our fault. But what I wanted to say is that, so the restrictions I have I'm a halachic Jew. The only problem is, I don't say kinnot. Not one. I get up very early in the morning, and I go to the Temple Mount, which I've been doing for many, many years, and that's another issue altogether. I understand for some people that might be too much. Again, this is so misunderstood, because where we go is not the place of the temple. It is the outer temple complex wherein a person, not only is a person allowed to be there, but you're allowed to. The Mishnah Mefurash says you're allowed to have a corpse there. The only thing is that the Gzerah D'Rabbanan, that Tumat Guf is more serious in that area than Tumat Maiden, so you have to be Tavul. But we don't, in any way, God forbid, cross the boundary of where the Azarot B'Kudoshot were. But anyway, so I get up early in the morning, I take my children to the Temple Mount, and I don't say the keynotes, because I think that it is a historical lie for me to sit on the floor. I'm not in Lodz Ghetto. So for me to sit on the floor and say, Tata, come back to us, please forgive us. And he's like, I already did. I gave it to you on a silver platter, so I'm not blaming him anymore. It's not his problem, it's my problem. So it would be a much more honest statement, in my opinion, to say, I'm saying for the Jewish people, and I think which is what they are saying, unfortunately, is, you know what, we don't want it. We'd rather play this mourning game every year, the nostalgia game, and cry. Because it takes us off the hook from having to deal with the geopolitical reality, with all the challenges. But the truth is that if we wanted to do it, just like if you want to do anything, if you want to build a home, if you want to get married, all the things that you want to do, you do. Thanks for having me.
That's right.